Long ago, the small village of Agumo sat beside a big winding river. The river gave life to the village by providing water for drinking, washing and growing crops. But the elders warned to never go near the dark still waters of the Iyoku, the forbidden river, which flowed into the main river. Bad spirits lived there, they said, and any who went close would be cursed. Aziza was a pretty young girl of 15-year-old. She had long black braids, dark eyes that sparkled like the morning sun on the river, and a smile that could light up even the darkest spaces. Aziza helped her mother fetch water each morning from the well near their hut. One bright morning, as they walked to the well, Aziza's mother stopped suddenly. She gasped and pointed to the path ahead. A massive snake as big around as a grown man's body was stretched across the path, eyes shut tight. "Back away slowly, Aziza," her mother whispered. "Do not wake it." But Aziza did not fear snakes. She had been taught they were guardians of the earth. So she walked right up to the giant snake and with a soft voice said, "Good morning, friend. We mean you no harm." The snake's eyes shot open, black as night. Aziza and her mother froze. But then the great snake simply gave a slight nod and slithered off the path into the bushes on the other side. From that day, Aziza had a special connection to snakes. They would sometimes follow her on her walks, silently slithering behind like scaly shadows. She would speak softly to them, and they seemed to understand. The other villagers first feared the snakes, but then came to see them as protectors when they were around Aziza. One morning when Aziza was 16 years old, she went to the well for water as usual, but this time her snake friends did not follow. When she neared the well, she was startled to see one of the elders standing guard. "Why are you here, Elder Karim?" Aziza asked. The old man frowned. "I was stationed here to stop any from drawing water until the river can be checked." "Checked? Why? What has happened?" Elder Karim stroked his long grey beard. "During the night, something troubled the waters of the Iyoku, the forbidden river. When the first rays of sun hit it this morning, the waters turned a deep crimson red like blood. We fear some great evil has cursed it." Aziza glanced over at the rivers. The muddy main river looked normal, but the small offshoot, the Iyoku, did indeed glow a deep, unnatural shade of red in the morning light, like hot, molten lava. "I must see it," Aziza said. She started walking towards the forbidden river. "No, child," Elder Karim called, hurrying to block her path. "The Iyoku is strictly forbidden. That is why we station elders here when it shows signs of danger. Get back to your hut until we solve this." But Aziza would not be stopped. There was a power calling her to the river, like an invisible root tugging her forward. "Do not worry, Elder. I will be safe," she said with a calm, assured voice that did not sound like it came from a 16-year-old girl. Elder Karim looked deeply troubled, his wrinkled face lined with fear, but he merely shook his head and stepped aside, making a hand sign to ward off evil. Aziza smiled and continued down the narrow path towards the Iyoku. As she walked, snakes of all sizes slithered out from the bushes to follow her. Forming an undulating, scaly parade line, the little girl who could speak to snakes. When Aziza reached the banks of the forbidden river, the water seemed to glow even brighter, like a brilliant red veil had been thrown over its surface. The snake stopped and simply watched. Aziza stood motionless for a long while, looking out over the crimson river. Then she began chanting in a strange language. That did not sound like the common tongue of the villagers. It sounded ancient, powerful and almost inhuman. As she chanted, the red river waters began swirling and bubbling. Suddenly a form rose from the depths, a human-looking figure, but with the lower body of a massive fish covered in thick green scales. A mermaid, the other villagers who had gathered behind Elder Karim, to watch from a safe distance, began screaming and running in fright. But Aziza did not even flinch. She locked eyes with the mermaid and kept chanting. The mermaid was male, with a muscular human upper body, green scaly skin and sharp finned ears. It hissed and slithered fully from the river onto the bank. Then it reared up its massive fishtail and let out a deafening roar that shook the ground. At that moment, all the snakes turned and struck. As one, the whole parade slithered toward the mermaid, with mouths wide and fangs bared. But with a sweep of its powerful tail, The mermaid swatted them all away like blades of grass. Aziza chanted louder and pointed an accusing finger at the mermaid. It let out another ear-piercing roar, sounding more animal than human. Then it charged straight at her. Back at the village, the screams had caused every man to grab a spear or blade. They rushed towards the river, fearing the worst for Aziza. "Kill the mermaid! Protect the girl!" Elder Karim shouted. When they arrived, their eyes bulged at the sight of the snake army surrounding the massive mermaid as it loomed over Aziza. The mermaid raised a clawed hand to strike, but with one final chant, Aziza threw her arms up at the mermaid, and it froze in place, as still as a statue. The snakes instantly relaxed and slithered away into the bushes. No one said a word. Aziza walked up to the frozen mermaid, now just as tall as she was, and placed her hands on its scaly chest. The mermaid's eyes went wide, and its jaws opened in a silent roar. Then Aziza did something that made every man's jaw drop. She leaned in and pressed her lips to the mermaid in a deep, passionate kiss. The whole village watched in shock as Aziza kissed the terrifying mermaid creature for what seemed like an eternity. When she finally pulled away, the mermaid's eyes rolled back in its head, and it slumped over, unconscious. Aziza simply turned and began walking calmly back towards the village. The crimson river water faded back to normal. "What? What sorcery is this?" Elder Karim gasped when she drew near. Aziza looked up at him with those enchanting, innocent eyes. "Fear not, Elder," she said softly. "I have tamed the great beast and broken its curse over these waters. We can drink from the river again." Without another word, she walked through the stunned crowd of villagers and returned to her hut, all the snakes faithfully following behind her. In the days that followed, no one dared speak of what they had witnessed. Aziza did not explain herself, and no one asked. Life went on as normal, but over the next few months, Aziza's stomach began to swell and distend. At first, it was easy to hide under her flowing robes, but eventually it became clear to everyone that the young, unmarried Aziza was with child. "She has been cursed by the mermaid," the villagers gasped in hushed tones. Some feared the child would be a monster and wanted Aziza exiled from the village for her own safety during her birthing, but Elder Karim refused. "She is still the same child who has guarded and protected us all these years," he proclaimed. "If she has been impregnated by some dark magic of the Forbidden River, we must have faith in her." And so the villagers begrudgingly allowed Aziza to remain and give birth in her hut. They said prayers to the gods and ancestors, fearing what unholy spawn might soon enter the world. Finally, the day of Aziza's birthing arrived. The entire village waited with bated breath outside her hut, weapons at the ready should any foul creature emerge. Aziza's cries of pain echoed through the night as her mother and the village midwives assisted her. After hours of laboring, a final piercing scream rang out, and then the cry of a newborn baby. The villagers held their breath, gripping their spears tightly. But when Aziza's mother emerged from the hut, cradling a bundle of blankets, she had a peaceful smile on her face. "It is a boy," she announced. "A perfectly normal, healthy human boy." Gasps of relief and shock rippled through the crowd. Elder Karim went inside to see for himself. When he returned, he motioned for the villagers to lower their weapons. "The child is indeed human," he declared. "There is no dark magic or curse at work here over the next few weeks, despite the circumstances of his conception." The villagers came to accept Aziza's son. They saw he was just as any other newborn, with 10 fingers and 10 toes. Though he had his mother's enchanting dark eyes and bright smile, Aziza named him Kamari, which meant born of the river in the old village tongue. She raised him on her own with a little help from the village, but she refused to speak of how he had been conceived or who his father was. The years passed, and Kamari grew into a strong, healthy young boy. He seemed completely normal, except he never wanted to play in the river or even go near it, almost as if he feared it. On his 10th birthday, as the village was celebrating with song and dance late into the night, Kamari awoke from his sleep in a cold sweat. A force was calling him. Tugging him towards the forbidden river, he knew he should resist, but it was overpowering. Slowly, with a blank, trance-like stare, Kamari made his way out of the village and through the bushes towards the Iyoku River. The snakes that had once been his mother's guardians slithered out and quickly encircled the boy, as if trying to protect or perhaps restrain him. But Kamari simply pushed forward in his daze. When he reached the riverbank, the waters began glowing that unnatural, bloody crimson red. The snakes stopped and held back, hissing. Kamari paid them no mind. Stripping off his clothes, he waded out into the strange, glowing waters. He felt himself being pulled down, deeper underwater, until everything went black. The village woke the next morning to shrieks of terror. Kumari's lifeless body had washed up on the riverbank, his eyes still open and face frozen in fear. Kamari, the lone son of Aziza and her mermaid lover, was dead. The ground shook as Aziza let out a cry of agony that could have raised the dead. She fell to her knees in the mud, cradling her son's body and weeping. Elder Karim and the men stood in solemn silence. None could understand what dark forces claimed the boy. This was a tragedy no ritual or magic could heal. Just then, the river waters began churning violently, as if something huge thrashed beneath the surface. Suddenly, the monstrous form of the mermaid exploded from the depths. The villagers scattered in terror, grabbing weapons as the mermaid pulled itself onto the riverbank. With its massive finned tail and arms, it opened its jaws in a ferocious roar until it saw Aziza. The mermaid instantly froze in place, eyes locked on the weeping mother holding her dead son. As tears streamed down Aziza's face, something strange happened. The mermaid began weeping as well. Great heaving sobs shook its massive body slowly. Almost reverently, the mermaid crawled on its fins and stomach toward Aziza and Kamari's body. It nuzzled its head against the boy's cheek, letting out a mournful wail. The villagers could only watch in stunned, fearful silence as the legendary monster that had cursed their waters displayed human emotions over the loss of the boy. After untold ages of snakes, spirits, and the very river itself owing allegiance to Aziza, it finally became clear. She was the reincarnation of an ancient river goddess, and Kamari had been a demigod, the royalty of the river realm, born of her union with the mermaid deity. That was the only way to explain these unfathomable events. The mermaid looked up at Aziza with tears in its inhuman eyes. She gave it a small, solemn nod of acknowledgement. It then bowed its head to her and slid back into the river depths, disappearing for what was hopefully an eternity. From that day on, the forbidden river regained its natural flow, and the villagers paid it no more mind than the other waters that gave them life. And young mothers would whisper to their babes the story of the river goddess who fell in love with a creature of the deep and the blessing and tragedy that love brought. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you were captivated by the story I shared in this video, then make sure to hit that subscribe button below. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when I upload new content, ensuring you never miss out on another compelling story. Don't forget to also turn on notifications so you're always in the loop. Thanks for your support, and I'll see you in the next video. Aziza was heartbroken after losing her son Kamari to the cursed river. For days, she barely ate or slept, just crying over his small body. The villagers didn't know what to do. Finally, Elder Karim went to Aziza's hut. "Child, we must put Kamari's spirit to rest properly," he said gently. "It's time to prepare for his burial." Aziza slowly nodded. She bathed Kamari's body with sacred river water and dressed him in his finest clothes. The whole village then gathered to bid him farewell. As Kamari's body was laid in the grave, Aziza stepped forward in a voice thick with grief. She began chanting in that same strange ancient language as before. The villagers shivered. Her words seemed to hold great power. When the chanting ended, Aziza threw handfuls of red and black powders over Kamari's grave. Instantly, the dirt began shifting and mounding upwards like it was alive. The villagers gasped as the freshly dug grave rose up into a large mound, shaping itself into a miniature mountain. Aziza then sank to her knees and bowed her head low. When she stood, tears were streaming down her cheeks again, but her expression was one of peace and acceptance. "My son's spirit now rests in the hallowed grounds, safe from any curse or evil," she said resolutely. "He has returned to the river's eternal embrace." The days and weeks passed and life went on in the village, albeit tinged with sadness over Kumari. But Aziza had changed. Her smiles were warm but short-lived. Her eyes always looked haunted, viewing the world through a mother's profound grief. One night, Aziza woke with a startle. Something felt wrong. She looked around her small hut, but everything seemed normal, yet she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Suddenly, a cold chill ran down her spine as she heard a faint whisper. "Mother!" Aziza's heart pounded. That voice. No, it couldn't be. She held her breath, straining her ears. There it was again, a soft, familiar whisper. "Mother, help me!" It was Kumari's voice. Aziza leapt from her bed, tears streaming down her face. "Kumari! Kumari, my son, where are you?" She spun around, searching desperately. The whisper seemed to come from outside. Aziza flung open the door and raced into the night, following the sound of her son's haunting voice. It led her through the village and into the dense jungle surrounding it. Branches whipped at her face as she pushed deeper into the darkness. "Kumari, I'm coming, my son." Finally, she emerged in a small clearing, and there, hovering above Kumari's grave mound, was a faint, ghostly figure. Aziza gasped. It was Kumari, his translucent form flickering like a candle's flame. "Mother, you must help me!" His voice echoed all around her. "I'm trapped, bound to the river's curse." Aziza fell to her knees, sobbing. "No, Kumari, I laid your spirit to rest. You were supposed to be at peace." Kumari's ghost drifted closer, his eyes sad. "The cursed river is powerful, Mother. My body is buried, but my soul remains ensnared. You must break the curse, or I'll be trapped forever, suffering unimaginable torture." Aziza's hands trembled. "What must I do?" "I'll do anything to free you, my son. You must journey upriver," Kumari whispered, "to the cursed river source. There, you'll find a way to break its hold on me. But beware, Mother. The jungle is filled with dangers. Evil spirits and cursed beings will try to stop you at every turn." Aziza swallowed hard, but nodded resolutely. "I don't care what stands in my way. I will save you, Kumari. This I vow." As the first rays of dawn began filtering through the trees, Kumari's ghost slowly faded, but his final whisper echoed through the clearing. "Be brave, Mother, and trust no one." Aziza quickly got ready for her dangerous journey up the river. She packed some basic things: dried food, water containers, a rope, and her sharp machete for cutting through the thick jungle. The people in her village tried to stop her, saying the mission was too dangerous for one woman alone. But Aziza had made up her mind. She had to save her son's troubled soul no matter what. Before leaving, Aziza visited her son Kumari's grave one last time. Kneeling down, she pressed her hand to the soft earth. "I will come back, my son. Wait for me," she whispered firmly. Then Aziza began following the cursed river inland. The jungle closed in around her right away, blocking out the sun's light. Twisted vines and gnarled branches caught on her clothes and skin. Aziza cursed under her breath as she cut her way through, the humid air making her weak. She had only been walking for a few hours when she heard it, an eerie crying sound drifting through the dense leaves and branches. Aziza froze, listening hard. There it was again, a sad cry like a baby in distress, her heart ache. It sounded just like Kumari's cries when he was an infant. Feeling an urgent need, Aziza changed direction, pushing towards the source of the haunting cries. She stumbled into a small clearing and gasped at what she saw. A young woman from the village stood there, cradling a tightly wrapped bundle in her arms. She rocked back and forth, softly crying as she nuzzled the bundled form. Aziza felt a lump in her throat. She recognized this woman. It was Amina, one of the newest mothers in the village. Her baby son had been born just days before Kumari's tragic death. "Amina," Aziza called gently, not wanting to startle her friend. "What are you doing out here?" Amina looked up, her eyes wide and staring. Her face was deathly pale. "My son," she whispered. "My beautiful son." A cold knot formed in Aziza's stomach. Trembling, she stepped closer and peered at the bundle in Amina's arms. What she saw will be forever stuck in her mind. It wasn't a baby at all, just a grotesque bundle of sticks, vines and mud, roughly shaped like an infant. Amina seemed utterly convinced it was her child, cuddling and cooing at the woven monstrosity. "Amina, that's not your son!" Aziza cried in horror. "We have to get you back to the village." But the deluded woman just backed away, clutching the bundle protectively. "No, you can't take him from me." Her eyes bored into Aziza's, wide eyes and not understanding. Then Amina turned and fled deeper into the jungle, her wails fading into the shadows. Aziza stood there, shaken to her core. What sort of dark power could cause such a terrifying delusion? She had no choice but to continue on her way, praying she wouldn't encounter any other victims of the jungle's evil trickery. The jungle seemed to grow darker and more overgrown the further upriver she traveled. Soon, Aziza was cutting her way through an oppressive tangle of vines, branches and hanging roots, creating a claustrophobic maze. The dank air stank of rotting plants, and she could have sworn she heard scurrying creatures all around her. She tried to move quickly, her skin crawling. Suddenly, a gnarled root seemed to reach out and grab her ankle. Aziza yelped as she was pulled off her feet, crashing to the ground, panicked. She swung her machete, cutting the offending root. A foul-smelling green ooze gushed out, sizzling as it hit the jungle floor. Aziza scrambled to her feet and backed away, panting hard. There was no doubt in her mind now. The jungle itself was alive, and it wasn't going to let her pass easily. Gripping her machete tightly, Aziza pressed on, cutting and slashing her way through the ever-thickening vines and roots. More than once, she had to stop to furiously cut away at the grasping tendrils holding her fast. Her arms and legs were soon covered in cuts, oozing the same vile green pus as the cut roots, but she refused to give up. Aziza finally staggered into a small, clear space, gasping for the stale air. Her whole body screamed with pain and exhaustion. She collapsed to the ground, her vision blurring. That's when she heard it. A soft tapping sound. Straining her head up, Aziza's blood froze in her veins. There, just a few feet away, stood a twisted, half-human figure. Its lower body seemed almost melted into the very ground, gnarled vines and roots woven into its grotesque form. But its torso and head were unmistakably that of a man. The creature looked at her with dull, lidless eyes as it slowly raised a gnarled arm, ending in 3 sharp wooden spines, dripping with the same green ooze. Tap, tap, tap. Too drained to even scream. Aziza simply watched in mute horror as the creature pulled its arm back, staring at her unblinkingly. Despite her bravery, and despite her desperation to rescue Kamari's soul, she knew in that moment she was going to die. The creature tensed, ready to strike. But just then, the piercing screech shattered the heavy silence. Something shot from the shadows, a black blur of fur and fangs. The jungle well creature barely had time to turn before it was knocked to the ground, its throat torn open in a spray of foul green fluid. Aziza could only stare as a massive black panther stood over the thrashing monster, growling deep in its chest. With 2 more swipes of its claws, the creature's head was fully severed, steaming fluid pouring onto the soft earth. Amazingly, the vines and roots began writhing almost immediately, slowly absorbing the decapitated monstrosity's form back into the jungle floor until only a wet stain remained. But the panther wasn't done yet. Padding over to Aziza, the huge cat fixed her with fierce golden eyes. It opened its powerful jaws, giving her a full view of its gleaming fangs, and then spoke in a bone-chilling, rasping voice. "You are being hunted by an ancient evil, born of this cursed jungle. I sense great loss and determination in you, daughter of the village. Speak your journey's purpose quickly before the beasts return." Too stunned to be properly afraid, Aziza found her voice. "I am traveling upriver to the source of the curse to break it and free my son's spirit." The panther's eyes seemed to bore into her very soul. After a tense pause, it gave a curt nod. "Then you must have this." With that, the panther turned its head and sank its jaws into its own thick black fur. With a sickening tearing sound, it ripped out a clump of its coat. Aziza stared in horror at the weeping wound, red blood quickly matting the animal's sleek fur. But the panther acted like it felt no pain instead. It extended the clump of fur towards her with an expectant look. Despite her revulsion, Aziza knew better than to refuse the jungle spirit's offering. With trembling hands, she took the blood-soaked fur clump from the predator's jaws. "That fur is filled with my spirit's energy. Carry it with you, and it may keep you safe from the cursed jungle's vile deceptions. I will guide you as far as I can. Now come, we must keep moving before more beasts are drawn by the smell of blood." Without waiting for a response, the massive panther turned and began loping deeper into the jungle. Not daring to disobey, Aziza clutched the wet fur to her chest and scurried after the spirit guide. They kept walking through the thick forest. Sometimes gross monster things came out to attack them, but the big black panther just growled loudly, and the monster things went away scared. Aziza held tight to the bloody fur clump. She was so tired and hurting from all the cuts, but she didn't stop. After walking for a very long time, they came to a stinking swamp. Bubbles were popping up from the dirty water, and it smelled really bad, like rotten eggs. The panther stopped at the edge. "This is as far as I can help you," it said in a rough voice. "The curse's dark power is getting stronger ahead. You must use the spirit fur to protect you now." Aziza's heart was beating fast. She was so scared, but she nodded bravely. "Thank you for your help, jungle spirit." The panther dipped its head, then it turned and ran away, disappearing back into the deep forest. Aziza looked at the foul swamp waters. She could see human skulls and bones sticking out here and there. Her stomach felt sick, but she took a deep breath. "I have to keep going for Kamari." Holding her machete and the spirit fur tight, Aziza stepped into the dirty swamp. The foul water splashed around her legs as she waded forward. She tried not to look at the skulls. Suddenly there was a loud noise, and a smelly green gas burst out of the swamp all around her. Aziza gasped and coughed, covering her nose and mouth with the fur clump. The gas stung her eyes and made her dizzy. Through the haze, she saw shapes coming out of the swamp. At first, they looked like waterlogged dead bodies, until they got closer. Their bodies were disgustingly bloated, with skinny limbs and sunken skull-like faces. Their eyes were empty black holes, and they opened their mouths in terrible screeching wails. Aziza wanted to run, but she stood her ground, holding the spirit fur up protectively. "Stay back, cursed ones!" she shouted in a shaky voice. The corpse things ignored her, continuing their eerie advance. Aziza shut her eyes tight, holding the fur up like a shield as the first one lunged. But no attack came. After a few moments, she opened her eyes again. The corpse things were gone. Somehow the spirit fur had protected her, making the evil swamp visions disappear. Feeling enormously relieved, but also more tired than ever, Aziza kept going forward. Hours seemed to pass. As she walked through the never-ending swamp, she shuddered each time her feet touched another skull or bone. The foul smells clung to the air, making her feel feverish. Just when she felt she couldn't go on any longer, the water became shallower. A short distance ahead, Aziza could see a raised piece of firmer ground. A twisted dead tree stuck up from its center, skeletal branches reaching at the dirty sky, forcing her shaky legs to keep moving. Aziza finally pulled herself up onto the little island of land. She collapsed on her back, sides heaving, staring tiredly up at the bare branches above. That's when a new horror appeared over her. Dozens of shriveled humanoid forms hung from the dead tree's branches. Their tiny, leathery bodies twisted gently in the swamp smells, hollow eye sockets gaping down at her. Aziza opened her mouth to scream, but an eerie sound stopped her. It was a raspy whispering. The shrunken corpses were whispering, their bone-thin lips barely moving. She strained to understand the words. "Give it to us." Again and again the papery voices chanted the same eerie phrase, building to a dry roar. "Give it to us! Give it to us!" Aziza huddled on the ground, shaking violently, realizing the horrid things wanted the spirit fur. She held it close as the whispering grew deafening, pulling it over her face to block out the sight of the dangling corpses. Just then, a loud snap made her jump upright. One of the shriveled forms had dropped from the branch and hit the ground inches from her face. Its skull twisted towards her, jaw creaking open in a lipless shriek. "Give it to us, sis!" Before Aziza could even think, she was stumbling to her feet and running. Not caring about the scratching branches and dangling bodies, she ran ahead blindly, churning through the shallow swamp waters and thick smells. The shrieks followed her, growing more fevered. "Give it, give it, give it!" She ran until her legs gave out, pitching her forward into blissfully deep water. Aziza let herself sink beneath the dirt, the cries finally muffled. She floated there, every muscle screaming, just trying to breathe. When she finally surfaced, breaking through a patch of floating scum and vines, she looked around in bewilderment. The swamp seemed to have ended, leading to a large open area. A series of rocky ledges climbed higher, the treetops far below. As she dragged herself out of the water and onto a mossy bank, Aziza realized she had reached the headwaters of the cursed river at last. The cliff faces ahead looked tall and forbidding, as if the very heart of the jungle was hidden beyond. She was so close now, but could barely gather the strength to keep going. Aziza collapsed on the bank, her grip on the damp spirit fur, the only thing keeping her conscious. No matter what other terrors lay ahead, she knew she had to keep pressing on to this evil source. Her son's tormented soul was waiting, somewhere beyond those cliffs. Aziza shut her eyes, mustering what little courage she had left. If you want to know what happened next, just like the video, share the video and type continue in the comment section, and we will drop the next episode immediately. Thank you very much for watching. If you are not yet following our page, PLLs do well to follow us, and in case you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, kindly subscribe to Tales by African Sage. Thank you for your support. We love you. Aziza rested for a bit to catch her breath after the swamp's nightmare. Her clothes were torn and covered in mud and yucky swamp water. The spirit fur was messy too, but she held on tight to it. It had already protected her from so many creepy jungle monsters. Looking up at the tall rocky cliffs, Aziza felt a little scared, not in her stomach, but she remembered why she was here, to find the source of the cursed river, and break the evil spell trapping her son Kamari's spirit. Taking a deep breath, she got up and started climbing. It was a really hard climb, especially after everything she'd been through in the jungle already. Loose rocks tumbled down as she pulled herself higher, cutting her hands. The hot sun beating down made her dizzy. She had to stop a few times to drink some water and rest. After what felt like forever, Aziza finally pulled herself over the top ridge. She gasped at the sight in front of her, a massive lake, perfectly still and round, stretching as far as she could see. The cliffs formed a giant bowl all around the black glassy waters. This had to be the cursed river's source. Suddenly, Aziza felt the hairs on her neck stand up. A strange energy tingled through the air. She looked around carefully. The cliff walls were covered in cave openings and shadowy cracks. She couldn't shake the feeling that something or some things were watching her from the darkness. Taking a few careful steps forward, Aziza looked down at the glassy lake. Its inky surface was so still she couldn't even see a hint of movement beneath. Yet she sensed something sinister and powerful resting in those black depths. Then, without warning, the lake waters violently exploded upwards in a tremendous geyser. Aziza stumbled back, shielding her face as the black liquid rained down. When she looked again, the eruption had formed a human-like shape, rising from the center of the lake, rapidly growing taller within moments. A gigantic figure towered over Aziza, formed entirely of the cursed lake's inky waters. It loomed dozens of feet high, a featureless black torso splitting into multiple tentacles like limbs, undulating across the surface. The only feature was a pair of piercing red eyes that seemed to glow from within its fluid head. In a deafening voice that shook the cliffs, the lake creature bellowed, "Ursus! Foolish human! You dare bring your curses to my home!" Aziza tried not to be afraid, holding up the spirit fur in front of her. "Dread beast, I am Aziza, and I have come to break the curses over this jungle and river to free my son's trapped spirit." The gigantic sloshing form seemed to consider her for a moment. Then it reared back, its crimson eyes flaring brighter. "Your son was an abomination, conceived from an unholy union. He disrupted the balance and woke my dark slumbers. I will not release him. He must suffer for eternity, trapped between the worlds." A terrifying scream pierced Aziza's mind. It was Kamari's voice, filled with unimaginable pain and desperately pleading for help. His cries echoed from everywhere, overwhelming her senses with his spiritual torment. Tears streamed down Aziza's face as she fell to her knees, clutching at her head. "Please, please, I beg you," she sobbed brokenly. "He is my son. You must let him go." All around, the shadowed cave seemed to come alive with shapes slinking out. Scores of wretched human-like forms, all composed of dense ropes of inky black liquid, like the towering beast, emerged and quickly circled Aziza. They shambled and writhed, eyeless faces twisted into leering sneers. The gargantuan beast's echoing voice shook the cliffs again. "You seek to defy the ancient curse that binds this land. Then you will join your son in eternal spiritual torment." It raised two massive tentacle arms as the ringing in Aziza's head intensified. The circling liquid creatures joined their master, slowly merging into a churning black wave that began crashing over her. Aziza wanted to scream, to cry out for mercy, but found herself suddenly mute, paralyzed with fear. The dark tsunami swallowed her whole. Her lungs burned as the murky waters filled her mouth and nose. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, lost in total inky blackness. Then, like a flickering light through the shadows, Kamari's voice reached her again, this time soft, soothing, encouraging his mother not to give up the spirit fur mother. Don't let go. With the last of her fading strength, Aziza clutched the sodden fur clump to her chest. An intense warmth instantly spread from her fingers, pulsing with energy and light from within the tangle of bloody strands. The cursed waters seemed to hiss and recoil from the spirit magic. Holding tight to the blazing fur, Aziza let its power envelop her. The oppressive black ocean fell away, replaced by an incandescent glow that bathed her in purifying light and warmth. All the fear, pain, and hopelessness melted from her body like waking from a nightmare. When the light finally faded, Aziza found herself standing strong and unbowed once more, facing the towering lake beast. It had shrunk, reverting to a tiny liquid form, just barely human-like, clearly weakened and afraid of the spirit fur's magic. "Impudent river demon," Aziza's voice rang out, emboldened and almost otherworldly in its power. "You have corrupted this land and tormented innocent souls for far too long. Your reign of darkness ends now." The small liquid being tried to flee, slithering back towards the lake's still surface. But Aziza simply raised the glowing fur, focusing its blinding white energy into a searing beam of holy light that struck the creature head on its form, convulsed, as if being purified from the inside out, shrieking in black, smoky bursts. At last, silence fell over the cursed lake as the dark spirit dissipated like a waking dream. The waters stilled, their inky blackness fading to a brilliant blue, shimmering mirrors of light reflected off the surface, banishing all traces of the ancient evil. Aziza bowed her head, clutching the spirit for close, as she softly repeated the words that had been shown to her. "Flow freely once more, sacred river. Your tainted chains are broken." In that moment, a familiar ghostly figure flickered into view beside the lake. It was Kamari, his translucent form beaming radiantly, finally released from eternal damnation. "You did it, Mother," he exclaimed joyfully. "You broke the wretched curse. I can move on now to the blessed realm where I belong." Aziza rushed forward, trying and failing to embrace her son's spectral body. Tears of relief felt unheeded as she smiled at him with a mother's boundless love. "My precious boy, I don't want you to go. Stay with me." Kamari smiled back sadly but shook his head. "You know I cannot linger in this world any longer. My spirit is finally free to depart, and your part in this realm is not yet done." He motioned towards the sunlight sparkling off the reborn lake surface. "This sacred place has been restored to its former glory, all thanks to your courage and love. A new goddess must take her rightful place as its eternal guardian." Realization slowly dawned in Aziza's eyes. Of course, from the moment they first encountered the river's darkness, some deep part of her had subconsciously awoken to her true divine nature. It was her spiritual essence that had taken form as the spirit fur's power, an innate goddess force destined to purify the lands. Kamari's voice pulled her back to the present. "You have suffered enough for your divinity, Mother. Say goodbye to me and accept your immortal role as protector of these waters." Aziza knew he was right, but their bond could never be as it once was. She pulled her son close one last time, drinking in his warmth before it inevitably slipped away. "I love you, Kumari, now and forever, and I you, mother." Then, like smoke in the wind, Kumari's spirit slowly disappeared into sparkling pieces of light. Aziza watched with tears in her eyes as her son's essence went up towards the sky, finally at peace. Though her heart hurt from his passing, Aziza felt a strong sense of purpose grow inside her. She turned to face the reborn lake, its clean waters shining with new life, drawing the spirit fur close. She let its divine energies flow through her. In that changing moment, Aziza's human form seemed to dissolve and reshape into something beyond. Her torn clothes and tired looks fell away, replaced by glowing blue skin that sparkled like the lake itself. Her body stretched and flowed into a snake-like shape, powerful coils moving across the cliff surface. When the change was complete, Aziza had become an amazing water goddess, a huge 60-foot azure serpent with fancy fins and armored scales. She opened her eyes, now bright blue orbs, and saw her reborn home with ancient wisdom. A deep, melodic voice came from her fanged mouth, echoing across the cliffs. "The river's blessing is restored. I will guard forever against corruption and darkness. Let this sacred place always remain where life is reborn." With an almighty surge, the gigantic water serpent arched her scaled neck and plunged into the lake's depths. The waters accepted their new goddess protector, parting to swallow Aziza's snake form in a shimmering vortex. When the surface calmed again, only the curved rear fin remained. Circling forever in the lake center like an iconic sculpture, the cliffs seemed to hum with renewed primal energies, their rock faces already becoming lush with green growth, and high above, faintly visible beyond the veil of the human world, a blazing new constellation had been written across the heavens. It twinkled in the unmistakable shape of a serpent, ready to strike the eternal stellar form of the river goddess, Aziza ever watchful. If you were captivated by the story we shared in this video, and you will like to know what happened next, just type the word "next" in the comment section. Then make sure to hit that subscribe button below. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when I upload new content, ensuring you never miss out on another compelling story. Don't forget to also turn on notifications so you're always in the loop. Thanks for your support, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay positive and optimistic. Your dreams will come through only if you don't give up. Few hours after Aziza became the goddess of the river, she declared and made a pronouncement that echoed throughout the jungle and the sea. She said on top of her voice, with a rumbling voice like the thunder, I shall no longer be referred to as Aziza. Henceforth, my name shall be known as Lila. Every mortal being must refer to me as Princess Lila, the protector of the water. After this, she slumped and fell asleep for what looks like days. Lila woke up groggy and disoriented, her head pounding as her surroundings slowly came into focus. She was in a plain white room, lying on a rigid hospital bed. Panic bubbled up in her chest as she muttered, "Where am I?" "You're in the hospital, sweetheart," said a warm voice. A nurse in blue scrubs appeared by her side, her expression gentle. "You're safe now. You've been through a lot." The words barely registered as fragments of memories surged through Lila's mind. Dark woods, monstrous swamps, and the battle with a river demon to save her son's soul. She gasped, trying to sit up, but the nurse pressed her back gently. "Take it easy," the nurse said. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. We found you near the old river bend, injured, dehydrated, and confused. It's a miracle you're alive." "No!" Lila protested, her voice rising. "You don't understand. I need to get back to the sacred lake." The nurse gave her a concerned look. "Dear, there hasn't been a sacred lake here for years. You need to rest. Your family is here, and they've been so worried about you." Lila's heart leapt at the mention of her family. Moments later, the door opened, and her mother rushed in, followed by her father and younger brother. Tears streaked her mother's face as she pulled Lila into a fierce embrace. "My baby, we thought we'd lost you forever," her mother sobbed. Lila clung to her family, overwhelmed by relief and emotion. When they finally pulled apart, her father asked, his voice tight, Where have you been, Lila? You've been missing for 2 months. 2 months? Lila echoed, stunned. Struggling to explain, she said, Papa, I was in the forbidden jungle upriver. I had a vision of Cameron. Cameron? Who's Cameron? Her mother asked, frowning. Lila hesitated, then recounted everything. The dreams of her son's trapped spirit, the voice that drew her into the jungle, the battles with malevolent forces, and her transformation into the guardian of the sacred river. When she finished, her family stared at her in silence, their disbelief palpable. Her father shook his head. You've been through something terrible, my girl. Your mind must have created stories to cope. We're just grateful you're alive. But it's true, Lila insisted. Her mother stroked her cheek gently. We understand, sweetheart. Once you've recovered, you'll see things more clearly. For now, forget about these spirits and goddesses. Lila looked to her brother, hoping for support, but he avoided her gaze, his expression unreadable. Frustration boiled inside her. Throwing off the covers, she stood, surprising them all. Lila, please, her mother began, but Lila cut her off. You have to believe me, she said firmly. Everything I've told you is real. Cameron, the jungle's darkness, the river goddess, it all happened. You may not understand now, but you will. Ignoring their protests, she walked out of the room, determination in every step. Outside, the city's chaotic symphony surrounded her. Blaring horns, distant machinery, the hum of life. But Lila paid it no mind. Her focus was on the grove of trees near the hospital grounds, their green leaves rustling as if calling to her. Lila, stop! Her mother cried, grabbing her arm. You need to rest. You're not well. Her father added, You were nearly dead when they found you. You can't go back to those woods. I have to, Lila said calmly, her voice steady with conviction. It's my destiny. I'm the guardian of the sacred lands now. She broke free and walked toward the trees, leaving her stunned family behind as she followed the pull of her newfound purpose. Lila's younger brother Raj broke the tense silence with a shaky voice. Lila, the things you're saying, they don't make sense. Monsters? River spirits? You're scaring us. Lila looked at him with sad, pleading eyes. I know it sounds unbelievable, but everything I saw was real. During my journey, I discovered an ancient power, one tied to our family for generations. She placed her hand on her chest, feeling the energy stirring within. The river goddess awakened inside me, showing me both beauty and terror. I've become her vessel, her guardian on earth. Her mother sobbed. What happened to you, my child? What terrible thing did you endure in that jungle? I'm not hurt or delusional, Lila insisted. My mind has never been clearer. I've been reborn with a sacred purpose, and I need to return to the jungle before it's too late. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the trees. Her family stood frozen in disbelief until her father shouted, Stop her! Security! 2 burly hospital guards rushed over, blocking Lila's path before she could reach the wooded edge. Mom, you need to come back inside, one of them said, his tone firm. Lila resisted, trying to break free, but her strength was no match for the men. Frustrated, she crossed her arms and stood her ground as her family caught up to her. Lila, please, her mother begged, tears streaming down her face. This is madness. It was all a dream. You've never been pregnant, never left this city. Cameron isn't real. The jungle spirits, the river goddess, it's all in your head. Lila's heart sank, and tears welled in her eyes. But it felt so real, she whispered. The jungle, the spirits, the goddess. It wasn't just a dream, I know it wasn't. Her father put a comforting arm around her shoulders. We want to believe you, but what you're saying, it's impossible. You were lost and sick, sweetheart. Your mind must have created these visions. Raj stepped forward hesitantly. Leela, you've always had a wild imagination. Maybe this is just your mind trying to make sense of what happened out there. Lila looked at her family, her face etched with despair. No matter how passionately she spoke, they wouldn't believe her. She felt utterly alone in her truth. The guards escorted her back into the hospital. Her parents, worried for her mental state, decided she needed to stay for further observation. Though Lila protested, her exhaustion left her too weak to resist. Over the following days, Lila underwent numerous tests and counseling sessions. The doctors listened to her story, but dismissed it as the result of trauma and dehydration. They prescribed medications to stabilize her, though they only left her feeling detached and numb. After a week, the hospital discharged her into her parents' care. At home, her mother doted on her, relieved to have her safe, while her father remained quietly skeptical. Lila spent her days in a fog, the memories of the jungle and her spiritual awakening growing dimmer. As if they were indeed the full moon, she whispered a prayer to the river goddess. "Please show me a sign, prove I'm not crazy, that it was real." A blood-curdling scream shattered the stillness. Lila rushed inside to find Raj trembling in the hallway, pointing toward the living room. "Monster!" he stammered, his voice shaking. "There was a monster in there!" The rest of the family hurried to the living room, flicking on the lights. They froze at the sight before them, a mound of damp soil and tangled jungle vines piled in the center of the floor. Embedded in the dirt were massive footprints, too large and unnatural to belong to any human. Lila's mother screamed while her father called the police, his voice frantic. The family huddled together in fear, but Lila remained rooted to the spot, staring at the evidence with growing clarity. The jungle had followed her home. The cursed forces she had battled were not finished with her. Her awakening had been real, and the ancient darkness she thought she'd escaped was coming for her. If you were captivated by the story we shared in this video, and you will like to know what happened next, just type the word "next" in the comment section. Then make sure to hit that subscribe button below. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when I upload new content, ensuring you never miss out on another compelling story. Don't forget to also turn on notifications, so you're always in the loop. Thanks for your support, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay positive and optimistic. Your dreams will come through only if you don't give up. The police came to Aziza's house right away after her father's frantic call. They looked very confused when they saw the massive muddy footprints and jungle plants all over the living room. "What in the world?" one officer muttered while taking pictures. "This has to be some kind of prank," the other officer said skeptically. "Tracking all this mud and vegetation inside doesn't seem funny, though." Aziza's father shook his head adamantly. "I swear, officers, we have no idea how this got here. We were just sitting down to watch TV, and then my son saw... well, he thought he saw a monster creature." Raj was still trembling as he explained what happened. "I just went to the living room to grab a soda from the kitchen. When I turned on the light, there was this giant, hairy monster standing in the middle of the room. It was taller than Dad, with long arms and bony fingers. It turned and looked right at me with these crazy red eyes and mouth full of fangs. Then it let out this horrific roar and I ran out screaming." The police officers exchanged doubtful looks as Raj's mother comforted him. "Son, I know you got a fright," the first officer said gently. "But seeing actual monsters, maybe you just imagined it, or it was a trick of shadows and lights or something." "No, I know what I saw," Raj yelled insistently. His whole body shook. "It was a real-life monster like the ones from a scary horror movie. You have to believe me." Aziza watched the whole scene calmly, deep in thought. She recognized the mud and plants. They were exactly like the vegetation from the cursed jungle she had traveled, which must mean Raj had indeed encountered one of the evil jungle's awful beasts. Somehow, the ancient forces she thought she had defeated were not done with her yet. They were able to reach out and send one of their monsters right into her home, perhaps as a warning, or the start of something bigger. Aziza cleared her throat to get everyone's attention. "It's all connected to me," she said firmly. "Ever since my awakening in the cursed jungle, I'm bound to its magic and the dark powers there. They must be after me again for some reason." Her parents shot her frustrated looks, but Raj studied her with surprising intensity. The police officers frowned at Aziza. "Miss, I don't know what you're talking about with jungles and magic," the first officer said seriously. "But if you had anything to do with this incident, whatever prank or stunt this is, it needs to stop right now." Aziza shook her head adamantly. "This is no prank, officer. I finally experienced what I was born to become, a human embodiment of a powerful river spirit. That jungle and its inhabitants were all too real." Gesturing at the muddy footprints, she continued, "Those markings could only have been left by one of the jungle's native beasts, like the creature my brother described. Evil, shape-shifting monsters that serve the cursed land's dark forces. They must be summoning me back for some reason after my awakening." Both officers' jaws dropped, and even Aziza's family was stunned into silence by her crazy insistence. Finally, the second officer stepped forward. "Okay, Mom, that's enough nonsense out of you. We're doing our job here, investigating an incident, not listening to wild monster stories." He took out his handcuffs with a serious look. "If you don't pipe down, I'll have to take you in on suspicion of this being a deranged stunt." Aziza looked at her parents pleadingly. "You have to believe me. That jungle was real. The evil spirits were trying to corrupt my soul and stop me from realizing my true destiny. When I awakened as the river's human guardian, I thought I stopped the ancient curse over the land, but now it seems the dark forces are still hunting me." The police didn't believe Aziza's crazy story about monsters and magic jungles, but her family knew there was some truth in what she said after the strange plants and footprints appeared. They convinced the officers that Aziza sometimes got confused, but meant no harm. Once the police left, Aziza's parents demanded to know what was really going on. Raj backed up his sister, saying he truly saw a terrifying monster creature appear briefly before it vanished. Aziza explained again about her journey into the cursed jungle to break an ancient evil spell. She described the evil beasts and dark magic she battled to finally join with the river goddess spirit and become its immortal human guardian. "I thought I defeated the curse's foul forces," Aziza said gravely. "But it seems they are still able to reach out from the jungle and attack me in this world now." She immediately had a flashback on how everything started. 3 months earlier, she recalled when she asked her parents if she could go hiking and have a picnic in the woods outside the city over the weekend. They agreed as long as she was careful. The day of her hike finally arrived. Aziza packed a backpack with snacks, water, and a blanket. She took a bus to the entry point of the woods and started hiking along the narrow dirt path winding through the dense trees. After an hour, Aziza came to a clearing with a vast river cutting through it. The river's murky water flowed rapidly over rocks and around bends. Aziza decided this would be the perfect spot for her picnic. She spread out her blanket on the riverbank and unpacked her food. As Aziza ate, she admired the river's mysterious power. She had always felt drawn to bodies of water. Suddenly, Aziza thought she saw something move in the river. A human-like form breached the surface for just a second before splashing back under. Aziza stared in confusion, wondering if her eyes played tricks on her. She continued eating, dismissing what she saw as her imagination. But then she heard an ethereal singing unlike anything she'd ever heard. La la la, la la la. The haunting melody seemed to come from the river itself, weaving in and out of the rushing currents. Aziza looked around but saw no one. The singing grew louder and more enchanting. she felt compelled to follow it into the river against her better judgment. Aziza waded in deeper and deeper until the water reached her waist. That's when something grabbed her leg and yanked her fully underwater. Aziza thrashed and kicked, opening her eyes to see the human-like form from before swimming in front of her. It was a mermaid with green, scaly skin and a powerful tail thrashing back and forth. The mermaid opened her mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth. She screeched at Aziza in a language she couldn't comprehend. Then everything went black. When Aziza regained consciousness, she was lying on a sandy shore illuminated by a strange glowing moss. Her clothes and backpack were gone, leaving her in just her undergarments. Aziza looked around at the cave surrounding her. Rock formations hung from the high ceiling, dripping water into shallow pools. The only exit seemed to be the underground river she had been pulled into. The mermaid suddenly surfaced in one of the pools. "Welcome to my home, the ancient refuge of the river goddess Oguvi," she said in Nigerian English. What are you?" Aziza stammered, scooting back in fear. "I am the last of the river mermaid, charged with guarding Oguvi's sacred waters from surface dwellers like you," the mermaid replied. "I have not left these caves in over 20,000 years. I have been trapped here for so long." Aziza's mind raced, realizing the severity of her predicament. If the stories she had heard as a child were true, mermaids were not to be trifled with. "Please, I didn't mean any disrespect," Aziza pleaded. "I was just hiking and picnicking. I'll leave right away." The mermaid laughed, her sharp teeth baring menacingly. "You are not going anywhere, human. You are the chosen one who will release me and my kind from this underground prison." "What are you talking about? I don't know anything about you or this goddess," Aziza said, fighting back tears. The mermaid swam closer, her tail flicking back and forth like a snake ready to strike. "Long ago, my ancestors revered and protected the river goddess Oguvi. We were her guardians," the mermaid explained. "But the surface people turned against us and Oguvi, seeing us as monsters rather than mythical stewards of nature." Aziza listened intently, too terrified to respond. The mermaid continued. "Oguvi rescued us by encasing these underground caves in an invisible shield powered by her magic. She made us a deal. If we remained loyal and kept the river's waters pure, one day a human woman with Oguvi's bloodline would come and combine her life force with ours. This would remove the shield and return us to the surface to reign over the rivers once more." "And you think that human is me?" Aziza asked cautiously. The mermaid cackled, showing razor-sharp teeth. "I know it is you, foolish girl. I have been dreaming of you for centuries. You have Oguvi's cursed blood pulsing through your veins, passed down by your ancestors who betrayed her." The mermaid lunged at Aziza with impossible speed, wrapping a scaly hand around her neck and squeezing. Aziza gasped for air as she was dragged towards the glowing pool. "By combining my life force with yours, the curse will be lifted and I will become the true river goddess. We will enslave the surface world just as they once did to us." Aziza thrashed and kicked, managing to break free for a second. She scrambled away towards the cave's exit, not caring about the dangers of the raging underground river. But the mermaid was too fast. With a powerful lash of her tail, she knocked Aziza back down and pounced, straddling her and pinning her arms to the ground. The mermaid opened her mouth unnaturally wide, displaying 3 inward curved rows of teeth coated with a green liquid, venom to immobilize prey. She leaned down, her venom-dripping mouth inches from Aziza's face. Aziza squeezed her eyes shut and turned away, whimpering in terror as the end drew near. Suddenly the mermaid reeled back, screeching in agony. Aziza opened her eyes to see a large creature resembling a shrimp with massive pincers had attacked the mermaid, tearing into her arm with its claws. The mermaid released Aziza and frantically tried shaking off the shrimp beast. Two more of the creatures darted out and went for the mermaid's tail. Seizing her chance, Aziza scrambled to her feet and sprinted towards the underground river, figuring being swallowed by the torrents was preferable to being eaten alive. She jumped in and allowed the raging currents to pull her away from the cave. Aziza held her breath as she was tossed violently through the tight winding tunnels. Just when she thought she would pass out from lack of air, Aziza was suddenly expelled from the river's mouth in a burst of white water. She gasped for air as she found herself in the open air once again. Aziza coughed and choked, pulling herself up on the riverbank. Miraculously, she had emerged from the underground just outside the city woods where her hike had started. She laid back on the grass, trying to process the wild events that had unfolded. Had it all been some sort of deranged nightmare? Or was there truth behind the vengeful river mermaid's claims about her being descended from a cursed river goddess? Aziza knew one thing. She would never stray from the city again or go near another body of water, no matter how drawn to it she felt. The woods and rivers harbored dangers she couldn't begin to comprehend. As she caught her breath, Aziza looked down at her arm and gasped in horror. There, beneath the mud and grime, her veins were glowing an ethereal blue, the same unearthly light as the cave's pools, and she passed out. Aziza's eyes opened slowly. At first, everything was blurry, but then she could see clearly that she was lying on an old rough mat made of straw on the floor of some kind of cave. The walls were made of damp dirt and had weird drawings and symbols all over them that Aziza didn't understand. In the middle of the cave was a small fire burning, which was the only light. "She's awake now," said a deep, rough voice coming from the shadows. Then a huge figure stepped out where Aziza could see it better. It was over 7 feet tall, with greyish leathery skin and a big ridge over its eyes that stuck out. Its body looked extremely muscular and strong, and it was covered in coarse hair all over. Aziza gasped in fright and tried to scramble backwards away from the monster, but it raised up one massive hand. "Don't be scared, child. You're safe here, at least for now," it rumbled. What are you?" Aziza stammered, her heart pounding hard in her chest. The creature looked like it had stepped out of her worst nightmares. "I am a Shitari," the beast answered in its deep rumbling voice. "A guardian sworn to protect the ancient river goddess Oguvi and her sacred waters and jungles all around." Aziza's mind raced as she tried to take this in. So the mermaid creature she had met really was telling the truth about there being ancient guardians protecting this river and goddess. "The mermaid," Aziza said hesitantly. "She told me I had Oguvi's bloodline, that I was supposed to join with her kind of creatures to break some kind of curse." The huge Shitari slowly nodded its great head. "The mermaid spoke the truth, though her intentions were wicked. You are the chosen human who is destined to awaken as the physical form of Oguvi, the goddess reborn on this world." Aziza shook her head adamantly. "That's totally crazy. I'm just a normal girl. This has to be some wild dream I'm having." "I assure you it is very real," the Shitari said grimly. The glowing lines underneath your skin that look like veins are proof that the spirit of Oguvy lies dormant within your body. The time has arrived for you to fully accept and embrace your destined role. Aziza looked down at her arm and could indeed see the eerie pulsing blue glow just below the surface of her skin, like visible veins, but glowing. A cold chill went down her spine. Long ago, in the ancient times, my Shatari kind watched over and protected Oguvy's jungles and the sacred river, alongside the mermaids who lived in the waters. The massive guardian continued. We all lived together in peace and harmony as the spiritual guardians of the land, river, and nature. Its huge fists clenched tightly. But then the human settlers came to this region, and they saw us as nothing but monsters that should be hunted and killed. After centuries of violent warfare between humans and US guardians, Oguvy made a terrible sacrifice to try to save those of us who remained. Aziza listened raptly, still having trouble believing anything the Shatari was telling her was real, yet also feeling deep down that it spoke the truth. Oguvy split her living spirit essence into two parts, the Guardian explained. One half she embedded into the body of a human female who was a direct descendant of her bloodline, and the other half of her spirit essence remained here in this sacred jungle, granting us the magic to erect cloaking barriers that have hidden us away from the human world all this time. It leaned forward intensely, locking its large amber eyes on Aziza. You are the living reincarnation of that sacred human bloodline, carrying half of Oguvy's spirit within you over all these generations. If you were to reunite her split halves by fully awakening her spirit essence inside your body, you could restore Oguvy as the all-powerful river goddess reborn into human form. Aziza's head spun as she tried to process this utterly unbelievable revelation about her apparent destiny and spiritual importance. Some part of her still refused to actually believe any of it could possibly be real. But the evidence was right there for her to see, glowing under her very skin. So, just say I actually do have this goddess's spirit inside me somehow, Aziza said carefully, trying to wrap her mind around it. What would happen if I did this reawaken thing you're talking about? What would it mean for me? What would I have to do? The Shatari's expression grew very somber. If you reunited Oguvy's spirit and awakened as her human avatar form, you would become an immortal living embodiment of the river goddess herself. Your existence would be eternally intertwined with her sacred river, jungles, and all of nature under her dominion. With your human form restraining and containing a portion of Oguvy's infinite power, you could walk the surface world as her corporeal representative and enforcer, carrying out her will and mandate to defend the natural world. It let those heavy words sink in for a moment before adding, embracing such a role would, of course, require you to permanently sever all ties to your former human life, family, friends, and pursuits. They would have to be left behind forever once you fully took on your new responsibilities as the awakened avatar of Oguvy reborn. Aziza's breath caught in her throat as she tried to imagine such an existence. Never again seeing her parents, her younger brother, or any of her friends and loved ones. Having to give up any normal human dreams, ambitions, or living experiences she might have had. All in order to become some kind of all-powerful nature goddess warrior figure. It was overwhelming even to consider. But before Aziza could sort through her flying thoughts and emotions enough to respond, a sudden hair-raising shriek echoed from somewhere outside the cave entrance. The Shatari immediately tensed, rising up again to its full towering height in alarm. "The mermaids have found us here," it growled, its voice echoing through the room. "They want to catch you before you can become Oguvi's avatar. They plan to use her power to control both the humans on land and in the water for their own purposes." More shrieks answered the first one, joined by a sickening wet flapping and slapping sound that was rapidly drawing nearer. Aziza felt panic clawing at her chest as her breathing became shallow and rapid. Without warning, the Shitari scooped her up effortlessly in one of its massive hair-covered arms, cradling her close to its barrel chest with surprising gentleness, given its immense size and strength. "We must flee at once, child," it told her urgently. "The mermaid's rage and vengeance against Oguvi's heirs knows no bounds or limits. I will keep you safe and guard you with my life until you decide your own path, whether that is to heed the call and embrace your destiny as the awakened embodiment of the goddess, or to turn away from it all and return to your former human life." Holding Aziza tightly, the Shitari ran quickly through a small tunnel at the back of the cave. They got out just in time, as a group of scary mermaid-like creatures slithered in through the main entrance. Aziza saw many eel-like monsters with big, sharp teeth. Their wide mouths opened and snapped, making a scary hissing sound as they smelled their prey. Even more frightening, their eel-like bodies moved smoothly over the cave floor, even though they had no legs, moving fast towards them. Aziza tried hard to keep quiet as the mermaid-like creatures got closer. She followed the Shitari quickly through the twisting underground tunnel. She knew that if she made even one scared sound, those creatures would find them right away, their awful cries echoing through the tight space. They kept turning through one tunnel after another, and Aziza had no way to know where they were going. The air got worse and worse as they went deeper underground. Aziza held onto the Shitari, her eyes closed against the complete darkness around them. Only their heavy breathing and the Shitari's loud footsteps broke the silence. Then, a scary screech came from far behind them. The mermaid-like creatures were still chasing, using their sharp senses to follow. The Shitari moved faster, rushing through the darkness towards somewhere unknown. Suddenly, a little light showed up ahead. As they got closer, Aziza saw a huge cave with tall, rocky walls. A big pool of water glowed faintly in the middle, with a small stream feeding it. Without stopping, the Shitari jumped into the freezing water, pulling Aziza under. She squeezed her eyes shut again, trying not to gasp as the icy water surrounded them. They seemed to swim forever before the Shitari kicked up, surfacing in a smaller cave dimly lit by glowing mushrooms. "We'll be safe here for now," the Shitari rumbled, pulling itself onto a ledge and gently setting Aziza down. "But the mermaids won't stop until they find you." "What are we going to do?" Aziza panted, pushing her wet hair from her eyes. The Shitari's eyes looked very serious. "You must fully wake up Oguvi's spirit inside you. Only with her power can you hope to drive back the mermaid's forces." It held out an old staff, decorated with glowing gems. When the Shitari held it, the runes flashed green, lighting up the cave with an eerie green glow. "You must become Oguvi's human form, her living self, to protect this land." Aziza looked at the ancient being, barely understanding the huge responsibility given to her. But the urgent look in its eyes showed her there was no other choice. The entrance to the cave shook with huge impacts, like massive things hitting it from outside. The Shitari tensed, raising its staff as more crashes echoed. Aziza clutched her chest as Oguvi's essence inside her responded, ready to be reborn. A loud and terrifying scream filled the cave, announcing the arrival of the mermaid-like creature's elite monsters. Determination filled the Chitauri's eyes. "Get ready, child," it said seriously. "The fight for this land is about to begin." From the tunnel entrance, a giant wriggling creature started to come out. It looked like a huge eel, 50 feet long, with a mouth big enough to swallow a horse. Rows of sharp teeth lined its jaws. More scary creatures slithered out behind it, just as monstrous. The Chitauri sent out a bright green light from its staff, pushing the mermaid-like creatures back. "Aziza, you must act now!" it shouted. "Open yourself to Ogovi's power!" Aziza froze, unable to believe how crazy this was. How could she, a normal teenage girl, ever become an all-powerful nature goddess? The lead monster lunged forward, dodging the Chitauri's staff blast. Its wide-open mouth and sharp tongues reached for Aziza. She scrambled back, pressing against the cave wall. At that moment, she felt something deep inside her unlock. The glowing lines under her skin blazed bright blue. Oguvi's ancient awareness filled Aziza's mind. Power surged through her veins as the sacred river's unstoppable essence joined with her very being. Aziza stood up, her eyes shining like bright blue oceans. With a sweep of her arm, bright blue energy tendrils lashed out, catching the lead monster's tongues and flinging it back. The mermaid-like creatures recoiled from Aziza's newfound power. She felt Oguvi's control over the waterways and life of this land flow through her. "I am the Avatar," Aziza's voice rang out with the unmistakable tone of the awakened river goddess. "And this land is mine to protect." With an upraised hand, she called forth a massive water tendril from the cave pool, lashing it against the tunnel mouth and causing the stone to crack. The Chitauri quickly raised a shield as the cave began to collapse inward, cutting off the mermaid-like creature's path. For now, they were safe. But Aziza knew this was only the start of an ancient conflict reborn. Aziza was now at home again, with her mum, dad, and brother. She was no longer thinking about the strange things that happened in the woods that she wanted to tell her family about. Aziza said to them, "That's all I remember. Maybe what I said in the hospital about Kamari and the river goddess was important, but I don't fully get it yet. I'm sure I met a mermaid at the river who wanted to kill me and take my powers. I also remember seeing the Chitauri, who helped me find the power inside me." Her father shook his head. "Aziza, you were so dehydrated in those woods. Who knows what you really saw? This monster and jungle talk has to stop." But Aziza insisted it was all real, and the monster showing up in their home proved the evil forces were after her again, though she didn't know why. The family argued a lot. Aziza's parents thought she had a mental breakdown in the jungle that made her imagine everything. Surprisingly, Raj took his sister's side, saying he saw the creature too, so it had to be real somehow. Finally, Aziza's mother burst into tears. "I don't care what's real or not. I just want to protect my family from whatever terrible forces are here." That night, strange noises came from Aziza's room. Her parents rushed in to find her missing from bed. Suddenly, a scream echoed through the house. They ran downstairs and saw Aziza being dragged out the front door by something invisible. Raj tried to grab her, but was thrown back by an unseen force. Their mother fainted as the front door slammed shut, leaving only Aziza's terrified screams. In panic and tears, her father called the police right away, fearing the worst, that his daughter had been kidnapped, or even worse fate. Officers searched the house and the area around it, but found no signs of a break-in or struggle. It was as if Aziza had vanished into thin air, just like she had described happening to her in the cursed jungle months earlier. When the police could not find Aziza, her very worried parents thought that maybe evil forces from the ancient jungle that their daughter talked about had finally taken her. They did not understand everything, but they knew that powerful bad magic was involved. Against their better judgment, they found a local witch doctor named Mama Shibanga, who claimed to know about the supernatural, occult, and African folklore. Many people recommended her, even though her practices were mysterious. "Please, you must help us," begged Aziza's mother when Mama Shibanga came to their home. "Evil spirits have taken our daughter. We don't know what kind of dark forces are at work." The old witch doctor looked them over with her clouded eyes as she entered. "I see. So the signs were true. The ancient river goddess's cursed bloodline has been awakened again." She slowly walked through the house, running her bony fingers along surfaces and muttering words under her breath that they could not understand. Aziza's parents followed behind, unsure what to make of Mama Shibanga's strange methods. Finally, the witch doctor stopped in Aziza's bedroom and crouched down to look at some small scuff marks on the floor that the police had missed. "Yes, I understand now," Mama Shibanga whispered. "Your daughter's spiritual power was very great, the reborn river goddess's powers in human form. Such light was too tempting for the jungle's dark forces." She turned to Aziza's parents, her face serious. "They have taken her to the legendary river's breath, a secret cursed place where the boundary between this world and the next is torn apart. Your daughter is trapped in a hellish in-between realm, being forcibly made part of the jungle's evil group of river undead." Aziza's parents were confused and scared. Mama Shibanga explained more. "You see, a long time ago, the river goddess ruled these lands along with the human people, but their powers were misused, and the evil forces deep in the jungle killed the goddess. To punish the river people for turning away from her, the goddess put a bad curse on those left when she died. They would become undead river beings. Their bodies would slowly rot and melt until their spirits were taken by the river waters." Aziza's father's eyes went wide. "Are you saying these evil jungle spirits turned our little girl into some kind of rotting river zombie?" Mama Shibanga slowly nodded. "I'm afraid that is exactly their plan, though she would stay undead, serving their evil plans forever as a corrupted version of the reborn river goddess." Aziza's mother burst into tears, her cries echoing through the house. How could such evil forces exist to torment their innocent family like this? Her father pulled himself together, determination hardening his face. "Please, there must be some way to save our Aziza from this fate. To bring her back normal before she becomes one of these undead monsters." The witch doctor looked thoughtful for a moment. Finally, she nodded and said, "There is one way, dangerous and unlikely to work, but still a way. You must join me in going to the river's breath place itself on the night of the next new moon. There, we may have one chance to talk to the lingering spirit of the river goddess and beg her to take back her reborn power before it becomes corrupted." Aziza's parents exchanged a determined look and nodded together. They would risk any danger to save their daughter's soul from eternal damnation. Over the next few weeks leading up to the new moon, Mama Shibanga taught Aziza's parents basic defensive spells and rituals meant to temporarily shield them from the dark jungle forces. She also had them take part in daily cleansing rituals, burning special herbs and chanting to clear their spirits of fear, so they would be mentally ready for the hellish journey into the river's breath. When the night of the new moon finally arrived, Mama Shibanga led them deep into the most isolated section of the woods outside the city, guiding them along a hidden trail only she could see. "We must move quickly and in total silence," the witch doctor warned in a hushed voice as they crept through the inky darkness, their path lit only by her bobbing lantern. "The jungle's eyes and ears are everywhere." Aziza's parents exchanged nervous looks, their hearts thumping with every snapped twig under their feet. They could feel the jungle's sinister presence all around them, growing more intense with each step. After what felt like hours of tense walking through suffocating plants, Mama Shibanga stopped abruptly, holding up her hand to halt them. She pointed ahead silently. In the distance, through a rotting break in the ancient trees, they could see the river current rapidly churning and bubbling in unnatural ways. Strange, colourful lights flickered and glowed from under the water's surface. "There," Mama Shibanga whispered grimly. "The river's breath. A tear where this world meets the undead plain. The outer edges of the jungle's domain, where your daughter now suffers unimaginable torment." Aziza's parents stared at the haunting alien river in stunned silence, their hearts sinking with grim realization of what lay ahead. The witch doctor turned to face them, her features hardened by deadly seriousness. "From this point on, there is no path but through the river itself. You will be stepping directly into the dwelling of the darkest, most vicious supernatural evils. The jungle's undead prowl endlessly in the waters, looking for fresh souls to consume and corrupt into their vile tribe." She held up an amulet made of bones and river rocks, chanting secret words over it to fill it with protective magic. When she finished, Mama Shibanga handed it to Aziza's father. "This amulet will shield your spirit from being trapped in the river's waters and falling into their dark grasp. You must bind it around your chests as we cross. No matter what, do not let go of each other's hands or you will become separated. And once apart in this place, the undead river fiends will descend upon you without mercy." Aziza's parents agreed, ready to do anything to get their daughter back. They took off their shoes and socks, tied the charm around their chests as told, and followed Mama Shibanga into the warm, cursed river. As soon as their legs went under, it felt like 1,000,000 claws and teeth were scratching their skin, leaving red marks and making them bleed. Mama Shibanga held their hands firmly and led them forward, calmly chanting protection words. They waded deeper into the churning river, with every scary step. Suddenly, terrifying screams and cries came from under the muddy water as they went further in. Dark shapes twisted in gross ways just under the surface around them. Aziza's mother whimpered, squeezing her husband's hand tighter as they pushed on determinedly. The hellish noise grew louder, joined by wet slapping sounds, as if creepy creatures were rising from the riverbed. Then, the first undead river monster surfaced in front of them, its twisted human-like form decaying as it stared at the intruders with soulless eyes. More and more undead beings came up, clawing at them with long nails and lashing rancid tongues through drooling mouths filled with jagged teeth. Mama Shibanga shouted over the deafening noise, saying ancient banishing words that made the river fiends shriek and temporarily retreat. But they would only stay back as long as the chant continued. Hours seemed to crawl by in this nightmare, the family struggling hard to keep the ritual going as the endless hordes surrounded them from all sides, clawing and grabbing. The cold water turned red from their bleeding wounds as the undead horde closed in. Mama Shibanga chanted more frantically, sweating hard from the effort of holding off the ravenous fiends. Just as the protective spell seemed about to fail, a blinding emerald light burst from the river depths, making the undead masses recoil and shriek in pain. The dazzling glow intensified, revealing the graceful shape of a female figure made entirely of shimmering water. "The river goddess," Mama Shibanga said in awe, stopping her chant. The watery apparition faced them, features becoming clearer. It was Aziza, or at least her spiritual essence. She opened her mouth, and an ethereal voice echoed around them. "My reborn human form has been captured and tainted by the darkest underwater evils. You have braved their vile realm to find me." Aziza's mother cried out desperately, "Please, mighty goddess, you must purge the evil from our daughter and let her soul return to us." The river goddess's watery form crackled with energy as she responded. To do so now would disrupt the very balance of life and death itself. She has been too integrated into their twisted tribe. Aziza's father pleaded loudly, "There has to be a way. We'll sacrifice anything, pay any price to make her whole again." The goddess thought for a while before answering. "There is one last choice, a special ritual to put Aziza's living spirit and my own energy into a single new body, one that can be born from you to live in the physical world again, free from the underworld." The family quickly agreed, even though the goddess's words were confusing. She gave them instructions on doing an ancient ritual to prepare for the spirit transfer. As Mama Shibanga hurriedly led them through the steps, gathering strange ingredients from the river bottom, the undead creatures held back by the goddess's bright light stared hungrily, creeping closer. Finally, the ritual was complete. Aziza's mother gasped in pain and shock as a protective glowing bubble violently expanded from her stomach. Inside it, a tiny shining orb taking human shape. "It is done," the river goddess said, her brightness shining brighter than the sun. "I hereby give you this new life to cherish and protect. Your daughter Aziza, reborn, filled with my own eternal energy to guide her. Raise her in my ways from now on." With those final words, the goddess's blinding energy streamed into the mystical orb. The bubble pulsed outward in a shockwave of force, violently pushing the undead masses back into the haunted river depths. When it finally dimmed, Aziza's parents opened their eyes to find the small orb had become a healthy newborn baby, cradled in Mama Shibanga's arms, surrounded by dazzling lights. The baby cooed and giggled, seeming completely peaceful. A tear rolled down the witch doctor's cheek as she looked at the miracle, carefully handing the reborn Aziza to her crying parents. They hugged the new life tightly, finally letting go of the traumas and fears from their scary journey. Though they had many questions about their daughter's incredible new existence, one thing was clear: her radiant spirit was going to change the world.